This is a Hope 1032 podcast.
Warning. This episode contains adult themes, including mentions of pornography and suicide. Listener discretion is advised. I'm Georgia, and welcome to Finding Hope, the podcast that swaps out the depressing news headlines for stories of hope that won't necessarily make the front page. Each episode, we meet someone who's had a bit of a hard road but has found hope and healing along the way. And hopefully they inspire you to look for the good things in your own life as well. Episode 15, Joshua Broome. Joshua Broome lived a glamorous life, on the surface at least. But when he went to bed at night, he would think about the ways to end his life. After moving to Hollywood to pursue an acting and modelling career as a young adult, Joshua suddenly fell into the porn industry and quickly became a successful adult actor. He travelled the world and earned millions of dollars. But after years of shame, confusion and guilt, it all came crashing down. Fast forward, Joshua is now a pastor. Yes, a pastor. His old life is completely unrecognisable from the one he's living now. But how does an adult actor become a preacher of the gospel? Well, I'll let Joshua tell you that. A small additional note for this episode as well. My colleague Ben McKecken actually conducted this interview. So if you hear hints of another male voice, that's the voice of Ben and not me. Without further ado, let's meet Joshua.
In college, I was studying theater. So I started modeling when I was 14, 15 years old. I had a lot of success and I wanted to be an actor. So actor, model, but I wanted to be an actor more than I wanted to be a model, but success came a little easier with modeling. And I dropped out of school my second semester of college and moved to Hollywood. So I was living in Hollywood. I had a acting and a runway imprint agent in Hollywood, and I was doing okay. Like I had like everyone else in Hollywood, I had a job that was, to make ends meet because I was living far beyond my means and working pretty sporadically when it comes to like getting, jobs like bookings and stuff, but everything was fine. And then, at that restaurant, I met a group of girls that introduced me into the industry. They asked, like, have you ever considered acting? I was like, absolutely. I'm an actor. And being from a small town, I thought that was going to be my segue into, they were either working on a project that I could be a part of, or they had a relationship with a director and I could get an introduction. That's what I was thinking. So I was like, yeah, absolutely. I'm an actor. They're like, no, we're talking about porn. And I was like, wow, I didn't see that coming. For me, I had watched porn, but I didn't see it as real. And they asked if I would meet with their agent. And again, I thought, this is so weird. I don't really know what to make of this. But I agreed to meet with their agent. But in my mind, I thought it was going to be this weird, sketchy type of thing. I was going to go into a hotel. But I go into this very nice duplex and I walk down this hallway and I open this door and there's a guy sitting there with a three-piece suit on, and he asked me a few questions and he spoke directly to every insecurity that I had, because he was just like, who are you? What are you doing here? I'm like, I grew up, with my mom and, she was great. And I decided to drop out of school and move out here to do acting and this and that. I was hoping to make it. And he was like, okay, so you do some modeling and acting. There's not a lot of good looking guys in the industry. He's like, you could be really successful. And you have acting experience, and the industry is actually shifting to doing larger productions. With that acting experience, you could be the lead in these films. And to be honest, with all those traits, you could be as famous as you wanted to be. You would make a ton of money. You would travel the world. What do you say? And I was, at that moment, I was like, yeah, sure, sounds great. But I never intended to do it. And then he called and he was like, hey, we're going to send a car by. We're going to take you to this standardized testing place. And, everyone gets tested at the same facility. And, that way the data is consistent. We can, everything's controlled. So I'm like, okay, worst case scenario, I'll get a free test. And I go and take the test. And I was supposed to call them when the test came back the next day, and they had a shoot booked for me the next day, and my test didn't come back. And I was like, okay. And that was one of many times God was like, don't do that.
But Joshua didn't listen. His testing came back the next day, and that very same day, he was driven to his first production.
I don't know what I was thinking. I just thought I'd already done the test and he already's done this. And it was I started to it was the beginning of me justifying one thing after the other. It's I went this far. Well, I might as well go this far. And I did this. I might as well do that. And then again, I thought, okay, if I do this, I'll just do one. I'll make a few $100 and whatever, be done with it. And I get there and I thought that I was going to be helped. Here's this filming equipment, go do it, come back. And I get there and there's a receptionist, there's catering, there's camera A, camera B, camera C, there's BTS, there's probably 30 people on set. And then someone's like, hey, here's this paperwork, fill this out. And then someone comes up to me and is like, hey, here's this pill, it's blue, take it if you want to. Don't if you don't. It's in your hand. It's yours. Do whatever you want. We need you in 15 minutes. And he's like, if you chew it up, it works faster. And I'm looking over and there's this stadium lights set up around this bed. And I was just looking out, go in the bathroom, and I had a water and I was looking at myself in the mirror and I was like, what are you going to do? You're going to leave? They picked you up. They brought you to the set. What are you going to do? You're going to call them, tell you're going to leave. And just having this conversation with myself. And took the pill, slammed the water, walked on the set. And next thing I know, I'm regretting it, feeling dirty in this car, going home with this check in my hand. And very quickly, I learned that decision, it was going to change the rest of my life.
Joshua wasn't wrong. The production quickly went viral, and Joshua's life as he knew it fell out from under him.
All of a sudden, this content was everywhere, and both of my agents fired me. I was seeing someone, I had to confess up to what I'd done. She told me to take a hike. She worked at the restaurant that I was working at. She was kind of the nucleus of all of my friends. So all of a sudden, they hated me. I felt shamed. And so I quit that job. So all of a sudden, everything that I worked for since I was 13, 14 years old, everything I dreamed about that I was, getting closer to obtaining. I was getting roles in movies. I was, I was doing Fashion Week. My life was not bad. To be honest, I don't know why I said yes to that. But once I did, it was everything that I worked for was gone. And so that one turned into 1,000 over 6 years. And I did travel the world and I made over $1 million and I did all these things. But as my career progressed, you see Genesis 2, you're walking, you're naked, there's no shame. Genesis 3, sin enters the picture, and then shame enters the picture, and then guilt enters the picture. And all of a sudden you find yourself hiding from God, trying to cover yourself with these fig leaves. And that was me. I was hiding from my friends. I was hiding from my family. I stopped returning texts. I stopped returning phone calls. I stopped going home on holidays. And I found myself so depressed that I was questioning if I wanted to live or not. And it was because I had become my behavior. And the more movies I did, I saw myself as dirty. I saw myself as used up. I saw myself as someone who is selling themselves. And that was my only worth into the world. How could a woman ever want to marry me? How could a company ever want to hire me? How could I ever contribute in any capacity? I don't have any skills or talents. I'm just this person who sells themselves. And at that point, even though I'm just dying inside, I'm just going back every day because this is just who I am. So this is what I have to do. And in my career, I'm from the outside looking in, I've been nominated for Best Male Performer 3 times. And in 2012, I win the award. I win the award for, essentially the best male, star. And they call my name and they call my name again. And I'm not there. I'm not there. I'm at home on my face, crying my eyes out, contemplating how I can take my life.
Although glamorous on the outside, Joshua's life was at rock bottom until one day, a trip to the bank, of all things, changed everything.
I had gotten a check, and when I would get a check, I would always put it in the drop box or the ATM because I never wanted to look someone eye to eye and deposit the check, because on the memo of the check, it said what it was for. And I didn't want to deal with that. I was ashamed, so I didn't want to deal with that. But this day, no Dropbox, ATM, not an option. So I have to face the music. So I walk in and I'm like, man, how bad can this be? And I hand the check over. Do you have your account number? I don't know it. Swipe your card. They put it in for me. Here's your receipt. And I go to walk away. And as I'm walking away, the teller says, Joshua, was there anything I can do for you? And it was weird because it gets into the details right now. It was weird because the transaction was over. There was no reason for her to say that. And it just rocked me. The reason it just was so just earth shattering to me is because I had isolated myself from every single person that I knew in an authentic way. And I had not heard my real name in over a year because I went by a stage name. So, and then, I went to the gym, I ordered takeout, I went to set. I didn't party. If I was at a party, I was being paid to be there. I didn't do drugs. I drank sometimes at parties, but I just isolated myself. And I was just so miserable. And I was just so sure that this is just a card that I had dealt myself. This is just going to be life until something happens. And in that moment, it just I felt overwhelmingly just this really deep guilt. And what I felt was, man, my mom, who raised me by herself as a 16-year-old, had sacrificed so many things for me to have the life that I had. And all that she ever wanted me to do was to pick up the phone. And I just felt just the weight of just letting her down. I was just so ashamed, and it felt how can I contribute to your life as a son in any way? And I just stood back while, things were happening in her life, and I wasn't there. And I just felt the weight of that, and it just crushed me. And I picked up the phone and I called my agent. I quit. And I called my, the person I was in a contract with a company. I quit. And I called my PR person. I was put out a press release. I quit. And Luke 15 ran home to mom. And she didn't condemn me. She didn't do anything. She, I'm from the South. So instead of, a robe and a ring, she gave me some fried chicken and collard greens.
Just like that, Joshua packed up his life and moved cross-country back home. He had to work 2 jobs to make ends meet, at a gym and a grocery store, but the remnants of his old life still haunted him.
Everywhere I went, oh, you're that guy. You're that guy. What are you doing here? That's you, right? Everywhere I went, that's you, right? That's you. And I just felt humiliated. And I tried my best to lie to people. No, that's not me. tell me about your, what have you been doing the last few years? Oh, just doing some acting. Please don't Google me. And that's the way I was living my life for almost 2 years. After the money was removed and the affirmation was removed, the only thing that was left was the guilt and the shame, which not having the other things to somewhat mask it, it amplified it. So I'm sitting there doing these good things, and my career as a personal trainer actually starts to blossom. I get some, consistent clients, and I work my way up to management in a gym, and I don't have to work at the grocery store anymore, and everything's looking good. It's like, okay, I'm piecing my life together, but gosh, when I lay my head on the pillow at night, I just have, these horrible dreams and just feel this weight that just seems unsurmountable.
The weight eventually did get too much for Joshua to bear, and he decided to tell someone. He'd been friends with a gym client for a while, and one day he poured everything out to her.
For the first time, I decide, okay, I'm going to be honest. And I'm like, hey, I need to tell you something. I did a little bit of, and she was like, what? I was like, okay. I gritted my teeth. I'm like, all right, I'm going to tell her. And I told her everything. And I was like, I did all these movies. I did this. I kicked my brother in the shin when I was 12, and I meant to do it. And then she's just looking at me. And I'm like, is she gonna throat punch me? Like, what's happening? Like, is she gonna tell me to take a hike? Like, what's gonna happen? And then she looks at me and she says, well, I didn't expect you to say that, but I want you to know this. A person is not defined by the worst thing they've ever done. And a person is not defined by the greatest thing they ever accomplished. They're defined by who God says they are. I was like, she's like, do you know who God is? And I was like, yeah, I started listing all the things. And, for me, I put on this mask for so long with every person I meet, in that, like, when someone goes on a first date, more often than not, you're not going to be yourself. You're going to be the version of yourself that you believe the person sitting across you wants you to be. So that's who I was. I'm like, okay, wants me to talk about God? Yes, I know all this stuff about God. And I was like, yeah, yes, absolutely. I believe he created everything. Time, space, and matter came into existence. At the same time, there had to be a creator existing outside of those things. Yes. Yes, I believe that God is real. She's like, okay, do you have a relationship with God? I was like, and I was stumped. I was like, man, I don't know. And she's like, okay, tell me about your family. What do you like? And just like, never for one moment was like, this person that did this thing. And in that moment, that was the first time in a very long time that I just took a peek at myself, at anyone other than that person that did this thing. And she confronted it. She interacted with me in such a way that I was like, wow, if that is the thing that causes her to respond to what I said, if that is your underlining why, and that's the foundation of your life, that must be pretty strong to look something like that in the face and not even blink. I didn't give my life to Christ in that moment, but I was like, man, I'm really curious, because I listed of these things I knew about God, but you're telling me that you know God in a personal way, and you're responding to some of the things I'm saying in such a way that I'm very curious.
Joshua's curiosity got the better of him, and he accompanied this girl to church.
We go into this church, and it was called Hope, and their mission statement is we want to meet people where they are and encourage them to grow in their relationship with Jesus Christ. I was like, you want to meet me where I'm at? I don't know. I walk in, and the worship music was great, and like I was just kind of feeling it out. I was just there, but she really ushered me into the presence of God, and so did the atmosphere in such a way where like I hadn't heard anything or believed anything yet, but like I was leaning in. I was very curious. And the pastor articulated the gospel in such a clear way. And he told this story about Mephibosheth. And he was a beggar. And, the previous king was like, you know what? I want to go find this Mephibosheth. I want you to bring him to me. And Mephibosheth is, begging on a street corner, and he sees this guard approach him and knows, like, okay, that's a royal guard. I'm going to die. And when he's sitting there on the ground looking up at this guard, the guard extends his hand and helps him up and invites him to the king's table, not for a day, not for a week, but forever. And just this really beautiful picture of grace and just a peek at the goodness of God through the person of Jesus. And I was like, wow, like God sees me like that. Jesus loves me that much. And like in that moment, it was just like everything made sense that I'd ever heard in my life. And I just wept, and it was not a pretty sight, but I gave my life to Christ in that moment. And man, like it wasn't just my time in the adult film ministry. I grew up without a father, but my father was in the same town I lived in, and we would see each other. And like, he never did anything wrong to me ever, but just the absence of a father and the desire of a father, it made me feel like, well, I need to prove myself to this world. And I just strove. I just, like, everything I did, I had to be the best. And that achievement, it was almost like a momentary, Band-Aid over this underlying hurt that I had. And in that moment, I just realized that the father that I always wanted, I had.
And for Joshua, all it took was that one moment, which changed his life forever.
It became so real to me so quickly because, like, absolutely I had some stuff to process through, but like I was made new in that moment. And the thing that my heart was desiring that I didn't, I had this void in my life. I had this huge void in my life, and I thought money would fill it. I made it. It didn't. I thought traveling the world would fill it. I did it. It didn't. I thought being famous would work. It didn't. I did all these things and nothing worked. And that actually was why that amplified that depression so much. But in that moment, I felt peace.
Joshua now spends his days spreading the word of God, sharing his story of redemption through Jesus. That girl at the gym that he poured his heart out to and accompanied to church, she is now his wife, and they have 3 beautiful boys together. Joshua is miles away from his old life, one of smoke and mirrors.
So about 7 years ago, I walked into a pastor's office and I said, I think that God wants me to build a boat. He's like, what? I was like, let me back up. I think that God wants me to do something that is bigger than I can comprehend. And my grandfather did teach me this. If you want to do something, learn how to do it incredibly well and find someone who is doing what you want to do and ask a lot of questions. So I was like, I want to tell my story through the lens of the Bible. So I want to be able to read the Bible incredibly well so that I can tell my story, because really it's not my story because I couldn't fix myself. Jesus and what he did on the cross, that provides me with the provision to do that. So I was like, I want to tell the story. And he's like, okay, you know what? There's this guy, Andrew, that just moved here from Dallas. We're launching another campus. Maybe, you guys can meet. And little did I know that this man would become one of my best friends. Mm-hmm. We would meet together for about 15 to 20 hours a week for almost 4 years. He taught me how to read the Bible. He taught me how to teach people how to read the Bible. We went over Greek for a year. As we're going through that process, I had the opportunity to share my testimony. and I was terrified. And it was funny because I've been all over the world. I've done a lot of crazy stuff. So like standing in front of people talking was not something that was no sweat off my back. And then as I'm about to step out there, I feel this weight, not pressure, but like, this is important. And then I realized very quickly, I changed my language and I stopped saying my story. This is God's story, and I have a responsibility to tell it well. And I just shared the gospel. I shared my story, but I was like, man, never in my life have I felt like more peace when I was doing something like that. I just couldn't get enough of it. And it's just kind of one of those things where it's like, if there's anything else that you could do that. And at the time, my wife and I, long story short, but my wife and I, we ended up opening a gym and then opened another gym, and it was going really well. And I gave those away because I had an opportunity to step on staff as a pastor. And I was just like, there's nothing else I want to do. And I think that is the answer. Like, how do you know when you're going to, want to be a pastor? It's like, if you could literally do anything else and you would say yes to that, don't be a pastor. But if you feel at the end of the day that burns in your soul and there's nothing else that you want to do, that's where I stand. So that's how I knew.
And a final word of encouragement from Joshua for those that may be struggling with consuming adult content.
Porn is a counterfeit version of what sex actually is. So when you desire something that you can never obtain, you don't know how to process that because you're watching something that is augmented, it's edited. Those people who are there, they're selling themselves for something that they don't want. They don't want to do that. Like, no one lays their head down at night and is proud of that. Like, there's no amount of money. There's no, it doesn't matter how big your house is. It doesn't matter how much you travel. At the end of the day, when you're alone with your thoughts and everyone has a conscience, you lay your head down and you know what you're doing. And no one sits there and doesn't wish they were doing something else. So that's just true. And the reality of that is because those are people, they're not products. So, there's people on the other side of the screen. They're real. And sex is not something to be bought. It's not transactional. So if you treat people like products, it's going to impact your integrity. You're going to blur lines in your relationships. You're going to stop showing up. If you're basing what a relationship is going to look like off of a fictitious thing, you're going to start treating people in a way that doesn't make sense. You're going to start hurting people. You're not going to stop doing something that you don't truly believe is harmful for you and the people around you. So that's what you need to know. It is harmful for you. It's going to impact the way that you treat people, and the people that you love are going to be impacted by your actions. So you need to be honest with yourself. The next thing you need to do is you need to take inventory of your life. What am I allowing into my life? What am I observing with my eyes? What kind of conversations am I listening to that's going to trigger me to want to do these things? And also, what circle am I in where I'm hearing the voices that's saying this is normal? So for me, just some practical things I do. I don't sleep with my cell phone in the room. If you don't have some sort of app, whether it be Covenant Eyes or Fortify, or there's so many great apps out there that just, it makes it harder for you to do the thing that you've said you don't want to do. If you have an iPhone, you can just go to block adult content. And yes, it's really easy to unblock it, but you have to make the decision to swipe that button back. And the hope is you'll see that and you'll remember why you did that. And then lastly, accountability. You need someone in your life that you can have honest, open, transparent conversations with, because that is going to be the thing that really, really allows you to have success. So you need someone that'll really keep you accountable. You need someone to say, hey, okay, you did this again. You told me that you wanted to change your life. So let's have a real conversation. What led to you making that decision? Why did you do it? And when you dig into that and you can answer that why, you can identify that trigger and hopefully you can remove that. And that's how you win. So it's a process. And just know that, John 19:30 tells us that it is finished. So as a Christian, as a follower of Jesus, hell, death, sin, and the grave no longer have any hold on me. Like while we'll still experience, the want to sin, and we will fall into sin, we are free from the bondage of sin. So that if you fall and you stumble, remember how far you've come, pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and continue moving forward.
Thank you so much to Joshua Broome for sharing his story. You can follow Joshua on social media, and he has a brand new podcast out called Counterfeit Culture with Joshua Broome. All the details are in the show notes. If this episode affected you in some way and you need someone to talk to, Lifeline is available on 13 11 14. And a special thanks to my colleague Ben McEachern for conducting the interview with Joshua and handling his story with immense grace and understanding. If you or someone you know has a story of hope to share and you'd like to be interviewed for the podcast, I would love to hear from you. You can leave a comment on the Finding Hope page at hopepodcasts.com.au. If you liked this episode, be sure to subscribe to get future episodes in your feed and tell a friend about it. You can also leave a review on whatever platform you're listening from and tell us what you love about the podcast. I'm Georgia, and thank you for listening to this episode of Finding Hope. I'll leave you with this verse. In him, we have redemption through his blood, the forgiveness of sins, in accordance with the riches of God's grace. Ephesians chapter 1, verse 7. Catch you next time.
This is a Hope 1032 production. Thanks for listening.